We begin today on the Gemara Daf Lamed Ches Amud Beis, 3 lines up from the bottom of the Yomud, where it says Ukvashin Shadarkan Lasas L'Seicham B'Seichan Yayin. The Mishnah said that when you are preserving things or pickling things, if it's usually done with wine, then it's a problem. You can't use it from a guy. So Chizkiya says Leishanu El Shadarkan. So the Mishnah is saying this halacha in a case where it's a derech that they usually put in wine. Then I say that I don't know for sure they put in wine, so it's only aser b'achila but not b'hana. Avo b'yedua, but if you know for a fact that there's wine inside, then aser afil b'hana. Then it'll be completely aser even b'hana.
What is it?
Yeah, because it's wine, yayin, from a guy that is a chashash of yayin nesach, which is aser b'hana. Why is this different than what was mentioned earlier in a Mishnah regarding the morius, which is a kind of fish brine, fish fats? There, even though there is wine mixed in it, but Rabbanan allowed to have a no. It's actually machlokes, Rab Meir and the Chachamim, and according to the Chachamim, it's allowed ba'ana. That's the Gemara. The reason is hasam la'aburi zuama. There, the wine that's inside of it is not being made to add a flavor. It's just to take away the bad taste from the fish. But here, though, regarding the things that are being pickled and preserved, the wine added actually adds a good flavor. So in both cases, the wine is not be'en. It's not recognizable for itself. But this still is a difference, if it's adding a flavor or not. For Rabbi Yochanan says that afilu b'yedua nami muter. That even in a case regarding the kvashim that we're talking about here, even if you know for a fact that the guy mixed in wine and the ingredients, it's still going to be muter b'hana. Also b'achila, but muter b'hana. And so in other words, according to Rabbi Yochanan, when the Mishnah says darkan, it's not only darkan. It's even when you know for a fact that there's wine. According to Rabbi Yochanan, why is this different than this morius that we just spoke about, Rab Meir? Now here the Gemara is asking from Rab Meir's opinion. The aser b'hana, Rab Meir says that when there's wine in the morius, over there's always wine, and therefore Rab Meir says it's aser b'hana. So here Rabbi Yochanan is saying that even according to Rab Meir, in this kvashin, when you know for a fact that there's wine, it won't be aser b'hana. And says the Gemara that there's a difference, and here Rabbi Yochanan makes a distinction which is lenient, the other way around. Hasam yediyah mamoshe. Over there, regarding the morius, the wine is known to you. There's real wine that's there, and the point is not only the fact that you know it, but you know and you're drinking the actual wine itself, because you're dipping your bread into this morius, into this fish brine, so you're mamish getting from the wine itself. There, so Rab Meir was machmir that it's also b'achila and b'hana. Hacha loy yediyah mamasham. Over here, the mamashas of the wine is not known, which means that you're not actually eating the preservative ingredients that it's being pickled in or being preserved in. You're eating the vegetables, which is being preserved in these ingredients, which includes wine. But because you're not eating from that wine itself, therefore here, it's not going to be aser b'hana. Going back to the Mishnah, it said, "V'taras terufa," these fish that are cut into small pieces. Tzir she'em badaga, and when you have this fish brine that's made and it doesn't have this fish that's swimming around in it, so the Mishnah said this kilbus fish, which is a sign actually that it's kosher. V'chulu. The last thing the Mishnah said was there's a fish called chilik. That this chilik fish, there's a problem with it, unless you're getting it from a professional fish catcher and you can identify this chilik fish. So the Gemara explains what the story with this fish is. My chilik, what is this chilik? Sultanis. This fish is called a sultanis. Some say that this is actually the tuna. Why is it aser? Because there's a mixture of other non-kosher fish that are caught together with it. And there's another thing about this sultanis. When it's small, it doesn't yet show its scales and fins. So you can't even see a sign that it's kosher. Only later, when it matures, it's older, you could see. So therefore, usually the chilik fish is a problem. Actually, today with tuna, this is one of the challenges regarding the kashrus of tuna, is because they have these massive boats and they put out these huge nets where they catch tuna together with other fish, and then it's frozen right away, and you can't necessarily separate between the tuna fish and other fish. So we learned in the Braisa about the fish. If right now it does not have the signs to be kosher, doesn't have scales and fins, but it will grow scales and fins later on. That's the story with this sultanis fish. Another fish called ofitz. So because later it will have the scales and fins, it's mutter. Yesh lo achshav, on the other hand, if it has now scales and fins, but v'aser lahashir b'shosh ha'olam and hayayin, it sheds its signs of scales and fins when it's taken out of the water. Kagoy nakunnas v'afunnas katas v'stayis v'chastafayis v'otanas, which are all names in Persian of different kinds of fish. Or according to another opinion, it's Greek names of fish. So all these fish lose their scales and fins when they come out of the water, but mutter, it's going to be allowed. It says in the Torah b'mayim, as long as when it's in the water it has those scales and fins, it's fine. Achriz Rabavo beKesari. Rabavo announced in Kesari, where he was living, the following leniency. Kirve dogim v'ubran, the intestines of the fish and the fetuses, which means the eggs inside the fish. Nikachin mikoladam, you can acquire this from any person, because even though you can't see what fish it comes from, you can't see the signs if it's kosher or not. But in that area, it wasn't a problem. Because chaskasan einam bain elam miplusa v'aspamya, because we know it is an assumption it only comes from these two rivers, or these two areas of Plusa and Aspamya, and there we know that there was no non-kosher fish there. Similar Abaye said, Hai tzachanta. This tzachanta, which is the chilik fish mentioned before, the bev nara, from the river called Bev. Sharia, it's allowed to eat this fish. My time is, so the Gemara explains what's the reason. If you'll say the reason is because the water in this river rushes very quickly. This tame fish does not have a strong spine. So in a place where the water is rushing, he can't remain there. But, says the Gemara, that's not a good enough a reason, because we see that even the non-kosher fish could survive in such a place. You'll say, if you'll say the reason is because the water is salty. The high dog tommy, even though less like kalfi. So now this tommy fish, because it does not have scales, it can't survive in a place where the water is this salty. So again, the Gemara says that can't be the reason, because we see that it could survive in this place as well. All right, so this is the Havaman of the Gemara with these two Svaris. It's the Vart that said about this regarding the non-kosher fish. He doesn't have the spine to swim against the stream or to survive in a environment where it's very salty. A kosher fish swims against the stream, and in any environment he remains strong. That's a sign of a kosher fish. But the Gemara here says that there's a different reason. Ella, the reason why in this area there's no concern with using this fish, this which the Gemara calls chilik, or the name now here it gives is what does it get over here? Tzamat. Where am I over here? No. This fish tzachanta. So the reason why there's no problem with this fish, ela mishom deloi marbe tine doktami, because the floor of this river, it does not allow to have non-kosher fish here. The environment inside the water in this area is not going to allow for non-kosher fish to be there. Amar Ravina said, but idna. Now the Kashafchi Bey, Nahar Guzav and Nahar Gamda, since there's another two rivers from Guza and Gamda that pour into this place, and there's non-kosher fish that come from there, Asiri. So then the tzachanta or the chilik fish will be Asar. Amar Abaye said, Hachamre de Yama, this donkey of the water. Rashi brings, the Gemara says in Chulin that whatever animals there are on dry land, you have similar in the fish, besides a cholda, a weasel. But otherwise, you have a similar counterpart in the water. So the donkey of the water, shari, is allowed, even though the donkey is treif, but is not kosher, but not the donkey of the water. Tura de Yama, the ox of the water, aser, is actually aser. B'simanach, and a simon to remember this is that it works the opposite of the way it is on dry land. Tamei, what's tamei on yabasha is tar. In the water, it's tar. And tar, what's tar on the dry land, which is the ox, tamei. In the water, it's going to be tamei. There's some of Farshim that say, I think actually the Pri Chadash says this, that the Gemara here is talking about a kind of fish that looks like a donkey or an ox, which means that it's more like a mammal. It has feet, and yet, if apparently it has scales and fins, and it's kosher. But others say lav dafka, it doesn't have to have feet, it's a fish, but it has some similarity to the donkey or the ox, and therefore we're referring to it that way. Amar Ravashi said, Shvar Nuna Shari, fish called Shvar Nuna is allowed. Kadesh Nuna, fish called Kadesh Nuna Oster, is not allowed. B'simanach, and a simon to remember this, Kaidesh Lashem. that kodesh means that it's like something which is holy and it's dedicated to Hashem, and therefore it's forbidden to have any hana from it. The same as with this fish. Ikadamri, another version is kvar nuna aser. The fish called kvar nuna is forbidden. And simanach, the simon for this is kivrei oivekachavim, the kever of a guy which is tame, which is metame. Truth is, not only a kever of a guy is metame, but it's just a kind of simon. Rabbi Akiva ikla leginzik. Rabbi Akiva came to the place Ginzik. They brought him a fish, which was similar to the chipusha, which is a non-kosher fish. So what did he do? It wasn't clear to see if it has the scales and fins. He covered it in a basket, and he shook it around in the basket. And in the basket, he was able to see that some of the scales came off. And v'sharye, so he said it's allowed. Another similar story, Rav Ashi, or another opinion here, it's Abaye. Ikla lit tamduria. He was in the place Tamduria, Aisla Kamea, Hudnuna, the Havadamid Tzalufcha. So they brought him a fish that was similar to a non-kosher fish, Tzalufcha. Nakte, Lahada Yoime. So he held it out in the day, in the sun. And Chaza, the Avabet Simchi, he was able to see that it does have scales, Visharye, and he allowed it. Ravashi Ikla, who asked Ravashi came to a place, I see, Lakame, they brought in front of him, Nuna, or Hahu Nuna, this fish, the Havadami la Shafra Nuna, which was similar to the Shafra Nuna, which is a non-kosher fish. Chafia b'mashichli chivri, so he covered it in a white basket, and then Chazabe Kalfi, he was able to see the black, thin scales that it had. And Visharya, you're not allowed to eat it. Rabbi Babachone, Iklala Akra da Agma, Rabbi Babachone came to this place, Akra da Agma. So krivele tzachanta, they served him tzachanta, as mentioned before, this chilik fish. Shamelahu gavre, the havakarele bati. He hears this person referring to the fish as the bati fish, which is actually a tame fish. So Omar, Rabbi Bachana said, with the kakarele bati, if he's referring to it as the bati fish, mami no, davar tame is by. Must be that there is a tame fish mixed in here. So he didn't eat from it. This was in the evening, when you couldn't clearly see what's going on. Latzafra, in the morning, Ayimba, he looked closely, Ashkach Bey Davatame. He clearly found that there's non-kosher fish mixed in there. Karya Nafshay, he said on himself, the pasuk where it says, La Yu'una Latzadik Kol Oven, that Hashem does not allow any oven, any aveda, even b'shegi, to happen to a tzaddik, and he saved him from not eating from this fish. It said in Mishneh, V'hakaydish al chiltis, a piece of this chiltis, which is a sharp herb. There's a translation for chiltis there, or it's some kind of sharp herb that's cut with a non-kosher knife that has the fats. It was cut from meat and fats that the guy used, and therefore you can't take this kaidet of chiltis from a guy. So Gemara explains this. My time, what's the reason? Mishum the mafsikile b'sakina, because they cut it with this knife. Now the Gemara explains, even if the guy is cutting it with his knife that he may have used yesterday for his meat, his fatty meat. Now, the master had already said, and we learned this before a couple of times. Noisin tam livgam, when there's something that gives a flavor which is a bad flavor, and since this knife, the assumption is that it was used already 24 hours before. So then mutter, then it's allowed. But in this case, with this chiltis, it's different. Agav churfei, because of the sharpness of this chiltis, the chaltisa, because of this chiltis that's so sharp, what happens is, mechalyele shamnanisa. It revitalizes that fats that there is in this knife, and it makes it a good taste. So it gives a good taste, and therefore it's going to be awesome. So really, you see over here in the Gemara 2 points about this concept of something which is sharp, dava charif, which is discussed extensively in Halacha and Shulchan Aruch. One is the fact that we're talking about this chiltis that's being cut by a knife which is cold. Usually, the issue of the blia that is in a pot is when it's hot. Regarding something which is cold, we already learned before by the wine, the barrel, it's not such a big issue. It's very easy to rinse it out a few times and kasher it. Here, regarding something which is sharp, the flavor comes out by dava charif, even if it's cold. That's one thing. And the second point is, you see, the Gemara clearly says, which is even if it's usually nice and tam gam, but if it's sharp, then it comes out and it makes it sweet. It sweetens it. But there is a machlekes rishonim whether this is only specifically regarding this chiltis, which is apparently a very sharp herb, or it would apply by any other sharp thing like an onion or garlic and so on. So the Gemara, Avde de Rab Levi, the slave of Rab Levi, have a kamavzvin chiltisa. He was selling chiltis, pieces of chiltis. Kinach nafshid Rab Levi, when Rab Levi passed away, also Kamed Rab Yochanan, they came and asked Rab Yochanan about this. Are they allowed to buy from the slave, which was a guy, this chiltis that he's selling? Amrulei, so they asked the question, Ma'ala mizbah mineh, could we buy from him? Amalu Rab Yochanan answered, Avdoi shel chaver, the slave of a chaver, of a person that's like Levi, that's careful in all the halachas, hareo kachaver. We can trust him like the chaver himself. He's trained, he knows, he follows exactly like he learned from his master. Ravuna bar Minyoimi zavint chilta me'anche the beise that Rav Amram chasida. So Ravuna bar Minyoimi, he bought tcheles. This is the tcheles that's used to for the tzitzis. So he bought it from the wife of Rav Amram chasida. So he wasn't sure whether he can trust her. This is actually tcheles. Tcheles is very expensive, and instead of tcheles, those thieves would instead sell what's called kala ilon, that had a similar color, but it wasn't at all the tcheles that came from this chalazim fish. So Asla Kamed Rav Yosef, he came to ask Rav Yosef whether he can trust Rav Amram Chasida's wife, Le'yave biyode. He didn't have the answer to this question. Pagabe Chanan Chayte met him. Amalei, he says to him, Yosef Anya Minole. How are you going to trust? How would you ask Rav Yosef about this? He's poor and he doesn't buy these kinds of expensive items, and so therefore he wouldn't know this halacha. And he said, B'didi ava ovda. With me there was a similar case. There's a vini tachilte manche de beisa de Ravana, which was achua de Rab Chia bar Abba. I also bought cheles from the wife of Ravana, which was the brother of Rab Chia bar Abba. V'asoyle kamei Rav Masna, and I came to ask Rav Masna if I could trust her. Le'ave biyode, and he did not have the answer either. Asoyle kamei Rav Yehuda ma'agronya, so I came to Rav Yehuda from Agronya, and Amali, and Rav Yehuda said, "Oh, nafalta liyad." You fell into my hands, meaning that you needed me to answer you this halacha, and I'll tell you what the halacha is. Hachiyam Shmuel, this is what Shmuel said. Eishes chaver, hareo kachaver. The wife of a chaver, of one that's careful in all halachas, has the same status like the husband. So it's similar to what we said before about the eved, the same is about the wife as well. Says the Gemara, Tanina lahad tanara banon. This is a proof for this that we learned in a brayse. Eishes chaver, the wife of a chaver, harehi kachaver, has the same status like a chaver, which is also usually the term that's used for someone that's careful with matters of tumah and tara and maestris, trumas and maestris, and therefore she has the status of a chaver as well. Avdish chaver, the slave of a chaver, harehi kachaver, is also like the chaver. Now chaver shemeis, a chaver that dies, Ishtayu of his wife and children, of B'nai Beisai, anyone living in his home, they keep their status of being trusted in all these areas with their peiris and with maestris and tara, until we see something that happened that causes a reason for suspicion. So to a courtyard where they're selling this tchelis. We can accept a status that it's actually the genuine tchelis, achati pasal. Until we see that something that they're selling is not tchelis and there's something pasal, then we can't trust them anymore. Tana Rabbanan Abraisa, we learned Eishes Ama Oretz, the wife of an ignoramus, and or Oretz also means someone that's not careful in these areas of maesters and so on. Shanisis l'chaver. So this wife that was a wife of an Amoretz now got married to a chaver. Or v'chein bita shel Amoretz, the daughter of an Amoretz, shenisis l'chaver, they got married to a chaver. Or v'chein avda shel Amoretz, the slave of an Amoretz, shenimkar l'chaver, that was sold to a chaver. Kulon tzrichen lekabel divrei chaverus. They all have to first accept the behavior of chaverus, that we see that they're eating bitara and they're giving proper maestris, and only after we see this can their status change that they'll be trusted. But the other way around, the wife of a chaver that marries an Amoretz, the daughter of a chaver that marries an Amoretz, the slave of a chaver that married, or they got sold, that is, to an Amoretz. After their husband dies or their master dies, and they come back to their original, they go back home, they go back to where they were originally, where they were married or a daughter of someone that was a chaver. When they come back, they don't have to again accept this behavior of a chaver. We don't have to verify first this because they already had this behavior from before. Divrei Rab Meir. This is Rab Meir's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda says, yes, they will have to accept again the behavior of chaveros, to be careful with these things, because they were in between, married to someone else or working for someone else that was an Amoretz. Rav Shimon ben Elazar said this as well, that they're going to have to be makabel again all the behavior of a chaver, And he said that Maisa Bishachas, there was a story with a woman, Shenisas L'chaver. She was married to a chaver, and Vayisa Kisheres Le'tfilin al yodeh. She was so dedicated to her husband, she would wrap the tefillin on his hand for him. But then, Nisas L'moiches, when she got married to a tax collector, which in those times the tax collectors were not trusted, they were ganovim. Vayisa Kisheres Loi Kishrei Moiches, and she would tie for him. She would prepare for him the receipts of for his what he was doing for his tax collection. Al yodeh for him. In other words, she was supporting and helping him in what he was doing, which was not honest. So we see that when it comes to a wife, she can be very dedicated to her husband, and even if before she was married to a chaver, but later she gets married to an Am Haaretz, if she comes back, she's going to have to accept Divrei Chaveris as well, again. The Gemara starts a new subject. Now, Omar Rav says, Chavis Aser B'chaisem Echad. The 4 different items that are in these letters of Ches, Veis, Yud, Saf, is not going to be allowed to use if it was delivered by a guy with only 1 seal. But Chamfag, the things that are hinted in the 4 letters of Chamfag, Muta B'chaisem Echad. They're delivered by a guy, this will be trusted even with 1 seal. So what are these things? So Chavis is Chalav, Basa, Yayin, Tcheles. Milk, meat, wine, and Tcheles. So since these are expensive things, so with 1 seal, the guy will tamper with it and will use it or exchange it for something cheap and put it back. So therefore, Asurim B'chaisem Echad. They're going to be also with 1 seal. The Gemara will explain how that applies to milk. Milk seemingly is not something which is unique and expensive. Now, Chiltis, Murius, Pas, Gvina, the 4 things that are in the letters of Chag Pas, which is these things which are not unique and expensive, the Chiltis or the Murius, as we explained before, or bread or cheese, Mutarim B'chaisem Echad. They are going to be allowed with 1 seal because the guy is not going to tamper with it as long as there's 1 seal there, since it's not anything unique. So now the Gemara says regarding the bread, Pas, the bread that we said that 1 seal is good enough, what is that to be concerned about? If it is that the guy wants to switch the warm, fresh bread with his cold bread, made the idea. That will be detected. You could see that the bread won't be fresh. So with 1 seal, he's not going to go out of his way to open, close, to be mezayif this. Sorry, did I go down a line? Could be I skip 1 second. Oh, made the idea. Yeah, sorry, I went down a line. The chipti b'desari. Okay, another thing the Gemara suggests that what could happen here, that he would switch wheat bread with barley bread. So now he made the idea. That's also something that you clearly see that he changed it. Now, if the bread of the guy and the bread of the yid is the same, and he wants to switch it, but since there's 1 seal here, and that's enough. There's nothing expensive about this. So he's not going to go out of his way to unseal it and then have to seal it again. Yeah, so when the Gemara says this about the bread, simply, and this is what Tosfos says, the Gemara is explaining why regarding bread 1 seal is good enough, and similar the Svar is regarding the other things mentioned with the bread. According to Rashi, the Gemara here is explaining that regarding the bread, it's so obvious that the guy won't tamper with it that it really wasn't even necessary for Rav to include bread here. It's pashut, that there's no reason for the guy to tamper with this. Okay, now the Gemara will address what was mentioned before regarding milk, that milk needs 2 seals. What's the difference? Why is it when it comes to cheese that we say that we're not concerned that the guy is going to exchange it? Cheese is in the 4 that we say that 1 seal is good enough, and chalav nami we should say the same with milk, that the guy won't tamper with it. So Rav Kahana said, you're right, apik chalav, you have to take out milk, and va'ayel chatichas dog, she'ein bo siman. So you have to say instead a piece of fish that doesn't have a sign if it's kosher or not. And here we're concerned that the guy will switch this. It could be a fish that's expensive that he wants, and therefore he has to have a double seal. In fact, the Gemara hainu basar, isn't that already included in meat? There's the meat of beef or fish. It should be included. Says the Gemara, no, today gavne basar. According to Rav, he counted them separately. There's 2 kinds of meat: the beef, and the fish. Shmuel says, and Shmuel is not really arguing a Rav, but he said these 2 categories of what needs 1 seal and what needs 2 seals. He only counted 3 in each category. Bias, asa b'chaisem echad, the things hinted in the letters of Beis Yud Saf, they will not be allowed with 1 seal. Machag, muta b'chaisem echad. Machag, that will be allowed with one seal. And he explained, bias is basa yayin cheles, asura mechaiser echad. So meat, wine, and cheles, which are expensive, that's forbidden with one seal. Morius, chiltis, and gvina, these three things that are not unique, mutar mechaiser echad. One seal is enough. So the Gemara explains, the Shmuel, chatichas dog she'ein ba simin, the fourth thing that Rav counted, which is the piece of fish without a simin, hainu basa. That's included in meat. And tregavni basa lo yamrinon. He doesn't mention the two types of meat. And so too, here we go back to the point that was mentioned before, pas. Bread, he didn't count either in the category that one seal is enough, because that's obvious. As the Gemara explained before, there's l'chatchila no reason to be concerned. So therefore, he only added other things that there would have been a svara to be concerned, and he explains that it's mutar. Tana Rabbanan and Abraisa we learned, Ein loikchen, Yamach, Machag. We don't buy the things hinted in these 6 letters, Besuria. In Syria, we're there, even from Yidden, which eat themselves kosher, but they're still suspected of selling to people things that are not kosher. They're not careful with the Isra of Lifnei Ivul Sit and Michshal, and therefore you can't buy from them. They could have got it from Goyim and they're selling it on to other Yidden. So what are these things? Lo yayin, not wine, v'le morius, not this fish brine, v'le cholav, not milk, v'le melech sal kundris, and not this sal kundris salt, which the Gemara will explain soon, which is also mentioned in the Mishnah. V'le chiltis, and not this chiltis, and v'le gvina, and not cheese. Ella min mumche, unless it's from someone that is trusted. You know that he's careful, that he only buys from Yidden, and he's selling what's good. But navakulon in misarech etz balabayis, if he's being invited to eat by any of these people in Syria, then mutter. And it's allowed. The only chashash is in the store. They sell things to Yidden which are not necessarily bought properly. Now, so this has the Gemara on the last point. Misayele le Rabbi Shua ben Levi. This is a proof for Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Said, Omer Rabbi Shua ben Levi, shagaloi, balabayis lebeisai. If any balabas, even in Syria, sends you a gift to your home, mutter. You're allowed to use it. My time, why? Because Balabais le'shovik va'achal yisura. The Balabais himself, what does he eat in his house? He only eats things that are permitted, not things that are asr, because he has that option. So he's not going to eat something which is asr. And when he's sending prepared food as a gift, what is he sending? He's sending the homemade food as a gift. It's not the food from the store that he sells that he is sending as a gift, and therefore we can trust what he's sending, just like you can trust when you eat in his home. Melach sal kundris. What is this salt? My melach sal kundris. Amar Rav Yehuda Mashmuel melach shekol sal kundrei roimi oichle noisa. This is salt that all of the bakers in Rome eat from it. Now, what's the issue with this salt? The Gemara explains it. Tana Rabbanan v'lotna ba'is braisa. Melach sal kundris shchayra asura. In one opinion, if it's black salt and it's forbidden. Levana, if it's white, muteres, it's allowed. David Rab Meir, this is Rab Meir's opinion. Rabbi Yudah says, Levana, asura, if it's white, it's forbidden. Shchayra muteres, black is when it's permitted. Rabbi Yudah Gamliel, Mishum Rab Chanina Gamliel, Mezu, Vizu, asura, both of them are forbidden. Now, what's the reason here? The one that says that this white salt is forbidden because kirvei dogim levanim tmeim uravimba. They would take from the intestines of non-kosher fish that were white, they would mix it in it. The opinion that says, no, it's the black ones that are aser, because kirvei dogim shchayrim tmeim uravimba. It's from the intestines of black fish mixed in inside this fish. The opinion that says that both are forbidden, it's because he says that they mix from white and from black, they mix both of them. So the Rishonim say it's not really a machlokes, each Amayra said the way it was in his area. There was this elder, a guy in our neighborhood, that he would apply on the surface of the salt the fat from the swine, which is called lard. And therefore, that you see how the salt from a guy could be an issue. So the Mishnah finished off and said, all these things mentioned in this Mishnah are only aser ba'achila, not allowed to eat, but it's mutar b'hanoah. Says the Gemara Lamutei. Why is it saying that again? It said at the beginning of the Mishnah already. Why is it saying again this harei elu? So it's coming to exclude the following. According to Chizkiya's opinion that was mentioned before, right in the beginning and the bottom of Lamed Chesamid Beis, Lamotei biyadua. This comes to exclude a case where you had the kvashin, things that were pickled, and it's known that they put wine in there. There it's going to be asar ba'hanoah as well. Rabbi Yochanan, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that even when it's known, it's only asa b'achila. So what is this? Hare elu asurin only b'achila, coming to exclude lumute murias or gvinas based on yanki. It's coming to exclude the murias and the cheese from based on yanki, which according to Chachamim is only asa b'achila, but according to Rab Meir, it's actually asa b'hana as well, which was a machlokes mentioned in one of the mishnahs before in this Perek, Ustamak Rab Meir. And therefore this Stam Mishnah here is saying this according to Rab Meir's opinion, that they will be aser b'hana. Here is the list of things that come from Goyim, but they will be mutter even to eat. Milk, a Goyim milks a cow, and there's a yid there that sees this. Vadvash, honey from Goyim. Vaduv devaniyos, and clusters of grapes, avapishe menatfen, even if there's from the juice of the grapes that is dripping from it, it's not going to prepare it to be susceptible to be makabel tumah, which usually when the grapes come in contact with the liquids that can be machsharit, so it would become susceptible to tumah, but that's only if it's your desire, you're interested in those liquids being there and you want to use it. But in this case, it's not going to be machsharit. Ukvashin, and when you're preserving or pickling, and it's a place where it's not the custom to include in the ingredients wine or vinegar. And v'taris she'ein trufa, these fish, when they're not cut into small pieces, so you could see if it's kosher or not. V'tzir sheyesh badaga, and the fish brine, when it has this fish swimming in it, that's a sign that it's kosher. And the previous mishnah was called as kilbis fish, which is a sign that it's kosher. V'ala shel chiltis, and the leaf of this chiltis. The chiltis itself, we said, is also because it's sharp and you cut it with the non-kosher knife, but the leaf is not being cut, so it's okay. And the zeise gluskois hamagulgalin, and the olives that are made in bowls, that this oil that comes out from it, and it becomes like congealed, like round. This is going to be mutter as well. Rabbi Yosi says, hashlochin, that these zeisim, which are shlochin, asurim, will not be allowed. And the Gemara will explain what this means. Hachagavim, grasshoppers. Habam in aslula, grasshoppers that are coming from the baskets that are put out in front of stores, asurim. That's not allowed because once they are there outside, the sellers, the storekeepers put wine in it. But min heftik, if it's coming from the heftik, which means from the storehouses, so over there they did not put any wine in it yet, then mutarin, it's allowed. V'chein l'truma, and similar, the halacha is regarding truma. The Gemara will explain what the v'chein l'truma is.
Why would they put wine in it with the grasshopper?
For a flavor. For good flavor.
Never
had it. Never had that dish, but apparently for a good flavor. So the Gemara Tanina Lahad Tanna Rabbana. What it says here proves what it says in a brayse, that Yeshiv Yisrael Vitzad Edreshel Evikechavim, a yid sits on the side of a flock of the animals of a guy. And the guy milks the animal. And he brings him milk to drink. And the yid has nothing to be concerned about. He can drink from this milk. Says the Gemara, Hechidami, what are we talking about? If there's no non-kosher animals in his flock, pshita, so it's obvious. If there is a non-kosher animal there in his flock, so then am I. Why is it allowed? He doesn't see the guy milking the cow or the animal, and he's bringing him milk. Why should it be allowed? Says the Gemara, there is a tamei animal in this flock. But v'chikachazi, that is, when this yid is sitting there, as soon as he gets up, chazile, he can see what the guy is doing when he's milking the cows or the animals. But v'chiyasif, when he sits down, loy chazile, then he doesn't see. So therefore the chiddush here is, the time I would think to say, even the yasif, loy chazile, since while he's sitting he can't see, so nechesh doma ma'isiyum arav bei, maybe he will bring from his own tummy milk and mix into the kosher milk. So kamash malan, if this is what this brayse is saying, kivin dechi koi, since when he stands up, chazile, he could see exactly what the guy is doing, irtusi mirtes, he's afraid, v'lei ma'arav bei, and therefore he's not going to mix in from non-kosher milk. So here you see the halacha of the yid being present and seeing the guy milking the cow, even if he doesn't mamish physically see, but he has to be in a position where he could get up and immediately see. The hadvash, the Mishnah said, honey from a guy is also mutter. The Gemara explains why. So dvash regarding honey, lamai necheshlo. What should we be concerned about? Imishumi ruvi is the concern that the guy mixes wine into this. He wouldn't mix wine. Misri sorry. Then the honey would go bad. Imishum bishuli yakom is the issue that the guy cooks it, even if it's cooked honey. But nachal kamayishu chai, you can eat raw honey as well. Imishum giyuli avikachavim is the concern that it's being stored in barrels. that there's the absorption of the non-kosher foods from the guy, but nice and tam lev gabel. That gives a bad flavor to the honey, and therefore mutter, therefore it's allowed. Then the Mishnah said, "V'haduv devaniyos," the cluster of grapes, "Aval b'shemanatfais," even if they're dripping from the juice of the grapes, "Ein ben mishum hech shemashke." There's no issue that now it becomes susceptible to tumah and it would be tummy. I'll ask you a contradiction from what it says in the following Braise habaytze legas. A person that's cutting his grapes for the press. He's going to press the grapes. So Shammai says these grapes that are wet from the juice that's oozing out of the grapes, it became susceptible to tumah. That's the halacha of any of the produce that has the liquids on it. If you want those liquids, then it becomes susceptible for tumah. Hillel says, no, it does not become prepared and susceptible for tumah. But then it says, V'oidi le Hillel l'Shammai. Hillel then admitted to Shammai's opinion that the juice that's oozing from the grapes, he wants it, and therefore it will make it susceptible to tumah. So why over here we're saying by the guy's cluster of grapes that it does not become susceptible to tumah? And says the Gemara, Hasam kabayle lemashke, because there he's interested in using that grape juice that's coming out. Hacha le kabayle lemashke. Here, the guy that with this cluster of grapes, he has no interest in this the juice that's oozing out of it, so therefore it's going to be okay. No issue of tumah. Okay, one more piece here. The said in the Mishnah, "V'taris she'ena trufa," that when you have fish, actually not pieces, that's not cut into small pieces, then you're able to see if it's kosher or not. So the Gemara explains, Tana Rabbanon, in a brayso we learned, Ezi, Taris, Sheina Trufa, what's in that category that's fish that was not cut into small pieces, Kol Sharosh V'Shedre Nicker. If you can see the head and the spine of the fish, then you can tell if it has the kosher signs, the scales and the fins. Now, Veiz Etzir Sheyesh Ba Doga. We mentioned the Mishnah when you have the fish brine and there's a fish that's swimming in it, and this fish comes there automatically. It's what it says, that this kind of fish, kilbis fish, is found in this fish brine, which is a sign that it's kosher. So what is this fish? Kol she kilbis achas, oishtei kilbis, if one kilbis or two kilbis are found in this fish brine. Shaitit this brine, they're swimming in it. So the Gemara says, well, hashte kilbis achas amris shari. If you find one kilbis fish in it, that's a sign that this is kosher fish. Because again, by the non-kosher fish brine, this kilbis fish does not develop there. So shtei kilbis mibaya. Needless to say that with two, it would be okay. Why does he add even two? So the Gemara answers, like Kasha, it's not a question. It depends where it is. Kan b'psuchos. If it's an open barrels, so one is not enough. Because you could say that one kilbis fish fell in from outside, so you have to have another one to know that it developed there as a sign that it's kosher. And kam b'stumais. But if it's being stored in a closed barrel, then even one kilbis fish is enough as a sign that it's kosher.